Hi, it's Zeke with the Eastside Church of Christ. Thanks for joining us for our Bible reading for the week of July 19th through the 25th, 2020. We continue in our Old Testament, and the narrative tells us of the continuing story of Elijah, who we find on the run from Ahab's wife Jezebel, who is intent on killing him. In his valley of discouragement, God finds Elijah and sets him on his feet and sends him back to work. After all, there's a king to anoint and a young protege to mentor. We see that in spite of God's deliverance of Israel from war with the Arameans, Ahab just absolutely refuses to acknowledge God. And in 1 Kings 21, we see just how low Ahab and Jezebel are willing to sink. They steal a fellow Israelite's land by deceit and murder, which just tells us the kind of character that these two are made of. Meanwhile, in Judah, Jehoshaphat provides the kind of leadership that the people need. In fact, it's the kind of leadership that the northern kingdom could have benefited from. Unfortunately, Jehoshaphat allies himself with Ahab in a war, even though they're told by a singular prophet of God that their efforts are going to be unsuccessful. And we'll see later on that the alliance is even deeper than that. We find out later on that Jehoshaphat's son actually marries Ahab's daughter. True to what the prophet says, the war is a disaster. Israel is soundly defeated, and when Jehoshaphat gets back home, he's soundly rebuked by one who tells him why should he love the wicked and love those who hate the Lord. Well, later on, surprisingly, he allies himself again, except this time with Ahaziah, and again Jehoshaphat is rebuked. 2 Kings continues with the wickedness of Ahab's son Ahaziah, while chapter 2 describes to us how Elijah the prophet is taken up into heaven in a whirlwind, and the mantle of prophetic significance falls to that young protege we mentioned before, Elisha. And Elisha goes on to perform a series of miracles, a lot of them that are very similar to miracles that Elijah himself had performed. One of the neatest ones is the healing of an Aramean leper. In fact, a general of the Aramean army, Naaman. That's in 2 Kings chapter 5. As we look at the Psalms this week, they fit well against the background of the king. Psalms 20 praises God for victory against the psalmist's enemies, while Psalm 48 praises God for the beauty of his holy mountain Zion and points to God's glory in caring for it. As we go to the New Testament, we begin a new gospel, the first gospel, the Gospel of Matthew. And we immediately see that Matthew is concerned for establishing Jesus' fulfillment of messianic prophecy. He's of the right lineage. His entrance into the world is divinely arranged, even though the murderous Herod does everything that he can to extinguish the life of the child Jesus. We see that God cares for his son and protects him. We see John the Baptizer come on the scene, and it's in a way that's reminiscent of the prophet Elijah. In fact, when you get a chance, look at the description of how John is dressed and what his diet is. Well, he baptizes Jesus, and God voices his approval by declaring that he's pleased with his son. Well, having been declared God's son, he's then led into the wilderness, Jesus is, to be tempted by the devil. And the devil tempts him by attempting to get Jesus to misuse his position. But Jesus meets every temptation with Scripture from Deuteronomy chapters 6 through 8, and eventually Satan flees. Well, after that, Jesus begins to call his disciples, and then he delivers that famous Sermon on the Mount. And if it's possible, although our reading this week only includes Matthew chapter 5, I'd encourage you to read Matthew 5, 6, and 7 all in one sitting, all at once if you can. Get a good idea of the whole sermon. And then ask yourself, what part of Jesus' sermon convicts you most? And when you've identified that, what are you going to do about it? Well, thanks for joining us this week, and we hope to see you again next week for another Eastside Bible reading. Thanks. God bless you.